Hey everyone, this is Michael again, and welcome to the Elimination Chamber review. Elimination Chamber was from the Jeddah Super Dome in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, and the show happened today. It started at 12 o'clock here, ended at like 3, around there. And Elimination Chamber, this show was terrible. This show was awful. You know, when WWE, we all know when WWE goes to Saudi Arabia, these shows that they put on over there basically feel like house shows. And we had on the card Roman Reigns versus Goldberg for the Universal Championship. This is the match that they were going to do 2 years ago at WrestleMania, but of course, COVID happened. Roman didn't want to work because of COVID. So we got this match two years later. We had the Women's Elimination Chamber match where it was Bianca Belair and Alexa Bliss, Doudrop, Liv Morgan, Nikki ASH, and Rhea Ripley. The winner of that match will get to face Becky Lynch for the Raw Women's Championship at WrestleMania. We had Ronda Rousey and Naomi. They teamed up to take on Charlotte and Sonya Deville. And Ronda Rousey had to wrestle with one arm tied behind her back, which they did a contract signing last night on SmackDown, which was a tape show. Didn't review SmackDown or AEW Rampage last night. You know, I was busy and I didn't review Dynamite. Just been a busy week for me. So sorry I couldn't get out those reviews. And we also had Drew McIntyre versus Madcap Moss in a Falls Count Anywhere match, which a scary spot in that match happened to Madcap Moss, which I will get to when I talk about that. Of course, we had the Raw Women's Championship on the line. Becky Lynch defend the title against Lita. And we also had the Viking Raiders versus the Usos for the SmackDown Tag Team titles, which I'll get to what happened with that. And the main event, it was the Men's Elimination Chamber. The winner will get to be the new WWE Champion, where the title was on the line. So Bobby Lashley defended the title in that Elimination Chamber. So it was Brock Lesnar, Bobby Lashley, AJ Styles, Austin Theory, Riddle, and Seth Rollins. So, but we also had a pre-show match, which I did not get to see. It was Rey Mysterio versus The Miz. But overall, Elimination Chamber, this show was awful. This show was absolutely terrible. But let's jump right into the review. So, of course, the pre-show, it was The Miz versus Rey Mysterio, which I did not get to see. The Miz ended up winning the match. You know, the Mysterios are in this feud, both Rey and Dominic. They're both in this feud with The Miz. And I'm like, who gives a shit? Who cares about this rivalry with the Mysterios and The Miz? I don't care. So The Miz won the match on the pre-show. And then going to start now with the regular matches on the Elimination Chamber card. So Elimination Chamber opened up with Goldberg versus Roman Reigns for the Universal Championship. And I was surprised that they were starting off this match, because we all know how this match was going to go. You know, we were expecting, spear, or Goldberg hits a jackhammer, or Roman hits a spear, 1, 2, 3. But this match went 5 minutes. So Roman Reigns ended up coming out along with Paul Heyman and the Usos. Paul Heyman ended up marching down to the ring behind Roman. He was holding the Universal Championship in the air. The Usos ended up returning to the locker room. Reigns ended up getting into the ring. He ended up raising the Universal Championship. Of course, getting pyro, as always. Reigns then got on the mic, and he ended up asking the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia to acknowledge him. So the crowd basically was cheering for Roman. And then we had Goldberg chants starting up. Out came Goldberg. Goldberg came out, and he got into the ring. And the match started. And both Reigns and Goldberg were looking around at the crowd. They then stared each other down. So Reigns wasn't happy with the Goldberg chants because there were, people in the crowd cheering for Goldberg. So Reigns and Goldberg locked up. Reigns decked Goldberg with some right hands. Reigns delivered a headbutt to Goldberg, started delivering some more punches. Reigns ended up sending Goldberg over the top rope out to the floor. Reigns followed up. He ended up slamming Goldberg into the announce table, into the Arabic announce table. Goldberg ended up sending Reigns into the barricade. He came back and sent Reigns into the barricade. Goldberg then worked on Reigns at ringside. Reigns ended up coming back in. Goldberg ended up following back to the ring because the ref was counting 8. Reigns then delivered an uppercut and some forearms to Goldberg's back. So Reigns ended up getting in the referee's face because the ref was warning Reigns, with the forearms. Reigns ended up charging, and Goldberg ended up leaping up with a spear to Reigns out of nowhere. Goldberg then called for the jackhammer. Reigns ended up reversing the jackhammer. He turned it into a Uranagi, and Reigns ended up going for the cover, which Goldberg kicked out at 2. So Reigns had Goldberg stunned as Reigns was waiting for Goldberg to get back up so he could deliver the Superman punch. Reigns ended up connecting with the Superman punch, and Goldberg was down. Reigns was waiting in the corner as Goldberg was slowly getting back up. Reigns called for the spear, and Goldberg connected with his spear to Reigns. So Goldberg ended up going for the jackhammer again, and Reigns ended up blocking it again. And Reigns ended up turning the jackhammer into the guillotine. Goldberg ended up dropping to one knee as Reigns tightened the guillotine on Goldberg. Goldberg then ended up ramming Reigns back to the corner. Reigns still had the hold locked in on Goldberg. Goldberg ended up sending Reigns back into the corner, but Reigns still had the guillotine still on Goldberg. Goldberg ended up going down. He started fading as Reigns still had the hold locked in on Goldberg. So the referee was checking on Goldberg, and Goldberg was unable to lift his arm back up. So the referee ended up calling for the match. So there you go. Roman Reigns ended up winning the match, retaining the Universal Championship. Post-match, Paul Heyman ended up joining Reigns in the ring. Reigns and Heyman ended up raising their fingers in the air. Heyman ended up placing the leg back around Reigns' neck, and Heyman ended up bowing to Reigns. So Reigns and Paul Heyman ended up heading up back the ramp, and that was that. Overall, this match went 5 minutes. It was okay, the match. It wasn't spectacular, but we all knew how this was going to turn out. You think that they were going to put the Universal Championship on Goldberg? Goldberg was not winning the Universal Championship. So hopefully this is it for Goldberg, and we don't have to see Goldberg compete in another match. I don't want to see Goldberg in another match. I know some of you, a lot of you probably don't want to see Goldberg also have one more match. It's time to hang it up, Goldberg. And then we had the Women's Elimination Chamber match. And the winner gets to face Becky Lynch for the Raw Women's Championship at WrestleMania. So it was Doudrop, Liv Morgan, Bianca Belair, Nikki ASH, Rhea Ripley, and Alexa Bliss. And this match was awful. This was boring. Sucked. But before I talk about the match, I just want to mention that this year, it's 20 years that the Elimination Chamber made its debut in November. It's going to be 20 years since the Elimination Chamber's debut. Going back to the history of the Elimination Chamber, it was created by Triple H, and it was introduced by Eric Bischoff in November of that year, 2002. The first ever Elimination Chamber, you all know, took place at Survivor Series of that year in 2002, which was, of course, from MSG, from Madison Square Garden. And Shawn Michaels won the match where he ended up winning the World Heavyweight Championship by defeating Triple H, Jericho, Booker T, Kane, and Rob Van Dam. Just amazing moment when he won the World Heavyweight Championship. And it was a awesome first ever Elimination Chamber match. Just one of my favorite Elimination Chamber matches, considering it was the first ever Elimination Chamber match that took place at Survivor Series 2002. But on to the Women's Elimination Chamber match. Bianca Belair ended up coming out first, and Bianca Belair would exit her pod last. So she ended up coming out. Out next was Doudrop, and then Rhea Ripley. And then out came Nikki ASH. Nikki ended up staring Rhea Ripley down as she ended up coming into the ring and getting in her pod. Nikki actually approached Rhea Ripley's pod and they were having some words together. And then out came Liv Morgan. And of course, Liv Morgan, as always, was getting a little bit emotional. So Liv was taunting the other competitors inside their pods. And then Alexa Bliss came out. And this was Alexa Bliss's return after her last match that she had in September at Extreme Rules, where she ended up facing Charlotte. And she ended up losing that match. And of course, Charlotte ripping up Lily. And Alexa just sobbing after that match. Seeing Lily all ripped up. So Alexa Bliss made her way out. And what did WWE do here? There was an article that I read that WWE was thinking of changing Alexa Bliss back into the goddess. What did they do here? Alexa Bliss comes out and she had the same fucking look that she had when she was doing Alexa's Playground. And she didn't look, as dark as she did when she was doing the Alexa's Playground. And she had the same music where it was like, oh, evil. Where's the goddess Alexa Bliss? So WWE is meaning to tell us that all these segments, all these therapy segments that we've seen on Monday Night Raw with Alexa Bliss were completely pointless. And then when she made her way into the pod, there was a swing. There was a swing set in our pod. And I'm like, I thought we were done with this whole dark Alexa Bliss thing. I'm surprised Alexa Bliss didn't do magic during this match. Still, they didn't even change her back to the goddess. Still with the same fucking gimmick that Alexa had when she had her Alexa's Playground. I thought we were done with this. So the match started off with Liv Morgan and Nikki ASH. They ended up trading holds. Liv delivered a takedown and a hurricanrana to Nikki. Nikki ended up sending Liv into the middle rope and then out to the steel platform. Liv ended up blocking a shot from Nikki into the chains. So Nikki ended up dropping Liv on the steel. She ended up going over to yell at Rhea Ripley. So Nikki was wasting time with Alexa Bliss, which allowed Liv to drop Nikki on the steel. So Liv ended up getting whipped into the chamber wall from Nikki off of a counter. Nikki had some offense on Liv Morgan. She ended up going for the cover. Liv ended up kicking out at 2. And then Doudrop was the next entry into the matchup. So Doudrop ended up shaking Nikki's hand, and she ended up holding it. She ended up dropping Nikki with a headbutt on the steel. And Doudrop ended up telling Nikki that there are no partners in the chamber. Doudrop then scooped Nikki and rammed her into the wall of the chamber. And then she delivered a running splash against the chamber wall to put Nikki down. Liv Morgan ended up coming flying in, but Doudrop ended up catching Liv on her shoulders, rammed her into the chains of the chamber, and then she ended up slamming Liv on the steel platform. Doudrop then delivered a running senton to Liv Morgan on the steel. So Doudrop ended up taunting Alexa Bliss, started talking some trash. So Doudrop rubbed Liv Morgan's face into the steel. Nikki dodged Doudrop, ended up sending her into the ring post. So the next entry into the match was Rhea Ripley. So all the excitedness on Nikki ended right there when Rhea Ripley was the next entrant into the match. So Rhea Ripley ended up cornering Nikki on the steel. Doudrop ended up decking Rhea Ripley from behind. Ripley ended up super kicking Doudrop in the middle of the ring, and she started staring Nikki down, started stalking her, but Nikki ended up climbing the chains. Liv Morgan ended up coming for Nikki. She ended up getting kicked down by Nikki. Rhea Ripley ended up grabbing Nikki's leg, and she ended up getting kicked away by Nikki. Rhea Ripley ended up climbing up with Nikki on the side of the wall. She then ended up slamming Nikki's face into the steel, and Nikki ended up falling onto Liv and Doudrop. Rhea Ripley ended up climbing back down, and Rhea Ripley delivered a riptide to Nikki, and she went for the cover, and Nikki was eliminated. So then Rhea Ripley ended up working over Liv Morgan, and then the next entry into the match was Alexa Bliss, which I gotta mention, Alexa Bliss didn't compete in the qualifying match to be put in the Elimination Chamber. WWE was like, oh yeah, Alexa Bliss, here you go, free entry into the Women's Chamber, which she was the secret participant in the chamber, which she revealed on Monday Night Raw this past Monday, where she was like, oh, I am going into the Elimination Chamber. Could have been anybody else besides Alexa Bliss. She got an easy pass into the Women's Chamber. Did not have to compete. WWE just offered her a free entry into the chamber. So Alexa Bliss did absolutely nothing to be a participant in the chamber. Free pass to Alexa Bliss from WWE. That's all it was. That's all it was for Alexa Bliss to get into the Women's Chamber. So Alexa Bliss ended up coming in. Bliss ended up dodging Rhea Ripley. She leveled Liv with her shoulder. She ended up fighting off both Liv Morgan and Rhea Ripley. So Bliss ended up delivering double knees to Liv Morgan and then a moonsault. She ended up going for the cover. Liv ended up sending Alexa Bliss face first into the turnbuckles. Liv delivered a double stomp to the back of Alexa Bliss. Rhea Ripley ended up launching Liv across the ring, and Rhea Ripley ran into a double stomp from Liv in the corner. The fans were getting on Liv, cheering for her. So Liv ended up going to the top. Doudrop shoved Liv off of the top, and she ended up hitting the pod on the way down. So Doudrop climbed the corner. Rhea Ripley ended up decking Doudrop. Rhea Ripley ended up climbing to the second rope with Doudrop. Doudrop ended up knocking Rhea Ripley down to the mat. So Liv ended up rocking Doudrop, climbed to the top for a sunset powerbomb. And Liv ended up covering for the pin, and she eliminated Doudrop. So Liv was selling a knee injury. And we had Bianca Belair end up coming in. So Bianca Belair ended up drop kicking Liv. And Liv ended up kicking Bianca Belair. She ended up going to the top. Bianca Belair ended up pressing Liv Morgan high in the air. Ended up holding her with one arm. And dumped her back into the ring. So later on, we had Rhea Ripley being eliminated by Bianca Belair. Because we had Bianca Belair dropping Rhea Ripley with the KOD. And Liv Morgan was eliminated, where Alexa Bliss ended up going up to the top. She ended up hitting the Twisted Bliss to Liv Morgan. So both Rhea Ripley and Liv Morgan were eliminated. So then it came down to Alexa Bliss and Bianca Belair. So Bliss and Bianca Belair were going at it. Bliss delivered a destroyer to Bianca. She ended up going for the cover. Bianca kicked out at 2. And the fans were chanting, "This is awesome," which I don't know why. This wasn't awesome. This match was absolutely terrible. So Bliss ended up stepping on Bianca Belair as she ended up going up to the top. Bianca ended up rolling out to the steel. And Bianca ended up catching Alexa Bliss in midair. Ended up powerbombing Bliss into the chamber wall twice. And she ended up using the top rope to slingshot Bliss. Bianca Belair ended up throwing Alexa Bliss back into the ring. Bianca Belair ended up going up to the top. She ended up landing hard on the flip because Alexa Bliss ended up moving out of the way. Bianca Belair ended up blocking a DDT from Alexa Bliss. And she ended up hitting a handspring and a moonsault to Alexa Bliss, but Alexa Bliss ended up getting her knees up. Bliss ended up rolling Bianca Belair for a close 2 count. Bliss ended up running into an elbow in the corner from Bianca. Bliss ended up trying to go for Sister Abigail, but it got blocked. And I'm like, Bliss is trying to go for Sister Abigail, meaning that WWE is still shitting on Bray Wyatt on Wyndham Rotunda. So the Sister Abigail got blocked by Bianca, and Bianca ended up dropping Alexa Bliss with the KOD. So Bianca went for the cover, and there you go. Bianca Belair is the number 1 contender to face Becky Lynch for the Royal Women's Championship at WrestleMania. Bianca and Becky at WrestleMania, I could already say that Becky Lynch is going to retain the title at WrestleMania. I think that's going to be one of the main events for night 1 of WrestleMania. I see that they're going to put probably Bianca Belair versus Becky Lynch night 1 of WrestleMania. That's how I would book it. I would book it before the WWE Championship match, which I'll get to explaining as I talk about the men's Elimination Chamber. So I could possibly see Bianca Belair versus Becky Lynch for the Royal Women's Championship. One of 2 main events for night 1 of WrestleMania. So that's my prediction. That's how I would book WrestleMania for the last 2 main events for night 1. And then we had Ronda Rousey and Naomi versus Sonya Deville and Charlotte Flair. Of course, Naomi and Sonya Deville still going at it with this feud that WWE does not know where to go with this feud. This feud has been absolutely dragged beyond belief. This feud needs to end between Naomi and Sonya Deville. It's been going on since fucking August. This feud needs to end between Naomi and Sonya Deville. It's gone on way too long. WWE needs to seriously end this feud between the both of them. So we had Charlotte end up coming out first. And then out came Sonya Deville. Sonya Deville still had her arm in a sling. And then Naomi ended up coming out first. And out came Ronda Rousey. Ronda Rousey came out. She was wearing a judo, she wore a judo thing that she wore in the Olympics years ago. And when I saw her come out with that, all in my head, I was thinking of this when Ronda Rousey came out and she was wearing that judo thing.
Everybody was kung fu fighting.
Yeah, I thought of kung fu fighting. This song. That's what I thought in my head when Ronda Rousey came out wearing that. She's gonna do some kung fu fighting on Charlotte and Sonya Deville. And I gotta say, Charlotte came out. She was wearing these red clothes, and I'm like, she looked like she was gonna go scuba diving. That looked like a scuba diving uniform on Charlotte. If you looked at it, that's how I saw it. So we had Ronda Rousey in the ring, and she was staring down Charlotte. The referee was tying one arm behind Ronda Rousey's back, which it wasn't tied behind her back fully, because she had her arm out like this. That's how it was tied up. So it wasn't fully tied behind her back. So the match started. Ronda ended up starting it off with Sonya Deville. Sonya Deville called a timeout. Of course, typical Sonya Deville. So she ended up removing her sling. So her arm was perfectly fine now. Ronda Rousey ended up laughing at Sonya Deville's ruse with the sling. And then Sonya Deville started unloading on Ronda Rousey from behind in the corner, off a distraction by Charlotte. Sonya Deville delivered a headlock. Ronda Rousey ended up sending Sonya Deville down to the mat, ended up kicking her in the head. Ronda delivered a leaping knee to Sonya Deville's head. So Ronda Rousey wanted Charlotte to come in. Sonya Deville tagged in Charlotte. Charlotte stalled, tagged right back out to Sonya Deville. Naomi ended up coming in, and she started unloading on Sonya Deville. So Naomi ended up finally getting her hands on Sonya Deville once again. So Naomi ended up nailing a death press to Sonya Deville, started delivering some right hands. Sonya Deville ended up turning around the corner. She ended up blocking a bulldog, and Naomi went face first into the post. So Sonya Deville ended up going for the cover. Naomi ended up kicking out at 2. So it was back and forth between the both of them. Naomi ended up coming back and tagged in Ronda Rousey. Rousey ended up dropping Sonya Deville, ended up trying for a one-arm armbar. And Charlotte ended up running in, started leveling Ronda Rousey. Charlotte ended up sending Rousey's good arm into the turnbuckle. And so Sonya Deville took control, started unloading on Ronda Rousey. She tagged in Charlotte. Charlotte delivered some strikes in the corner to Ronda Rousey. She was working on Rousey's good arm, started continuing with some strikes. Sonya Deville ended up tagging back in. She ended up keeping Ronda Rousey in the corner, and she delivered a boot to Ronda's throat. Ronda Rousey ended up trying to block, and Sonya Deville and Charlotte ended up beating her down in the corner. Charlotte then came in, ended up dropping Ronda Rousey face first into her boot, and she ended up kicking Naomi off the apron, which got boos from the crowd. So Ronda Rousey ended up fighting out of the corner, and she kept fighting Charlotte. Charlotte ended up cutting Ronda Rousey off, took her down, and Charlotte ended up focusing on Ronda's arm. Ronda ended up kicking Charlotte, and Charlotte just stayed on top of Ronda. Ronda ended up kicking Charlotte back, and then came in Naomi. And I gotta say, Naomi controlled this match against Sonya Deville and Charlotte. Ronda Rousey, when you saw Ronda Rousey in this match, you could tell that she didn't care. She don't care to be back. She doesn't care that she's here. And she's only just doing this for a paycheck. Naomi carried this whole match. So Naomi started unloading on Charlotte. She ended up drop kicking Sonya off of the apron. She delivered a big kick to Charlotte and then later her Hurricanrana to Charlotte. Naomi delivered a glow kick to Charlotte, sending her out of the ring. Naomi then ended up leaping over the top rope. She delivered a corkscrew plancha to take Charlotte back down. Naomi ended up bringing Charlotte back in with a crossbody. And she went for the cover. Charlotte ended up kicking out at 2. Charlotte ended up catching Naomi in midair and delivered a powerbomb. She ended up going for the cover. Naomi kicked out at 2. Charlotte ended up going for the figure 4. Ronda Rousey ended up breaking it up. Sonya Deville came from behind, sending Ronda Rousey out to the floor. Sonya Deville ended up tagging in. Sonya Deville ended up delivering the run knee to Naomi's face. She ended up going for the cover. Naomi kicked out at 2. So at the end of the match, we had Ronda Rousey. She realized that Charlotte wasn't coming in to fight. She ended up snapping down onto Sonya Deville's arm with the armbar, and Sonya Deville ended up tapping out. So there you go. Ronda Rousey and Naomi ended up winning the match. Overall, this match was awful. This match was absolutely awful. So then we had Drew McIntyre versus The Riddler, a.k.a. Madcap Moss. Falls Count Anywhere match. The match was fine, in my opinion. Drew McIntyre's in this feud with Moss and Corbin. It was just awful. And you had Madcap Moss's music, and I swear to you all, Moss's music sounded like this. It was like, joke. More like, shit. I swear, that was Moss's music. That was Moss's theme music when he came out. Going, joke. Awful. Absolutely awful. When I heard that, that was severe cringe. And then you hear the ha 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 ha. Awful. God awful. So Moss, aka the Riddler, came out along with Corbin, of course the Joker. And I call him the Joker and the Riddler because they're like 66 Batman, Joker, and Riddler, where they're just laughing. So Moss, like I said, Moss came out with Corbin. Drew McIntyre was out next. Drew McIntyre came out with his sword, Angela, as always. He ended up coming into the ring. Match ended up starting. McIntyre ended up getting double teamed by both Moss and Corbin. Moss started pounding on McIntyre. And McIntyre delivered a clothesline to Moss. He then ended up knocking Moss out of the ring. Started working him over, sending Moss into the barricade. McIntyre leveled Moss with a chop on the ramp. Corbin ended up running from behind. He ended up decking McIntyre because, of course, Falls Count Anywhere, no disqualification. McIntyre ended up chasing Corbin up the ramp as Corbin ended up running away to the back. McIntyre ended up running around to Moss, charging him. McIntyre ended up dropping Moss with a big boot. McIntyre sent Moss into the LED on the stage. McIntyre ended up going to powerbomb Moss off the stage. Corbin made the save, and Corbin and Moss delivered a double suplex to McIntyre on the ramp. Moss then ended up covering, and McIntyre ended up kicking out at 2. So Moss ended up beating McIntyre down the ramp. McIntyre ended up taking a big fallaway slam on the ramp from Moss, and he ended up going for the cover, and McIntyre ended up kicking out. So Moss ended up beating McIntyre back to the ringside area. Moss ended up sending McIntyre into the ring steps, and he ended up bringing him back into the ring. McIntyre ended up leveling Moss with a big throw. And McIntyre delivered another throw across the ring. And then here's the point in the match where, for Moss, it was a scary spot. So McIntyre ended up hitting the Alabama Slam to Moss. So when McIntyre hit the Alabama Slam, he ended up dropping Moss on the top of his head. Moss's head went right into the mat, went right into the canvas, which that was cringe right there. Like when his head hit the canvas, I was like, oh my God. So the referee ended up checking on Moss, and Corbin was distracting McIntyre, forcing him to chase him around the ring. Moss tried to interfere, but McIntyre ended up landing a belly-to-belly throw to Moss on the floor. And McIntyre ended up launching Moss over the commentary table with the belly-to-belly throw. And we had the replay of the Alabama Slam, which spiked Moss onto his head, where his head ended up in the canvas. It looked brutal as well in slow motion on replay. And I'm surprised that Moss continued with the match. You tell Moss probably had concussion there, and I'm surprised he continued with the match. So McIntyre ended up stalking Moss at ringside. McIntyre was ready to hit the Claymore. Corbin ended up nailing McIntyre from behind with a chair. Moss and Corbin then ended up running McIntyre through the barricade. Moss went for the cover, but McIntyre ended up kicking out at 2. So McIntyre slowly crawled back in the ring. Corbin encouraged Moss, and Moss ended up climbing up to the top turnbuckle. McIntyre delivered a chop while Moss was up top. McIntyre climbed up and delivered a superplex to Moss. So McIntyre landed bad, but he was able to drape his arm over Moss to go for the cover, and Moss kicked out at 2. So Moss and McIntyre ended up going at it. McIntyre ended up coming right back and delivered a Future Shock DDT. McIntyre ended up going for his sword. Corbin ended up running out, and McIntyre almost cashed Corbin with the sword. Corbin retreated back out of the ring. McIntyre ended up holding Angela, the sword in the air, while he delivered a Claymore to Moss. McIntyre ended up pointing the sword out at Corbin while he was pinning Moss. And he pinned Moss. He put his boot on Moss's chest. And there you go. Drew McIntyre ended up winning the match. Post-match, Corbin ended up looking off from the ramp. McIntyre posed on the turnbuckles. And he was warning Corbin with the sword. And that was that. So now we're going to be getting Drew McIntyre versus Corbin at WrestleMania. Who would want to see that match? Nobody. But I know we are going to get it at WrestleMania. Now tell me, does that scream WrestleMania match? Absolutely no. McIntyre and Corbin is not a WrestleMania match. But I know we're going to get that at WrestleMania. Overall, the match was okay between Moss and McIntyre. And then we had Kevin Patrick. Kevin Patrick was interviewing The Miz backstage. He kept saying that he's upset about what happened with the Mysterios. He kept saying that he will find a suburb athlete and a global star to help him even the odds. So Miz had someone in mind. He kept saying that he has to go make a phone call. And a lot of people I saw online, who could be the Miz's, surprise, athlete global star to help him even the odds. And a lot of people were saying, it could be Cody Rhodes. Can you imagine if it was Cody Rhodes leaving AEW just to be with The Miz? That would be awful. That would be absolutely awful. And, WWE is saying, oh, yeah, there could be one other surprise for WrestleMania. And I hear Logan Paul is going to have some sort of role at WrestleMania. Why? Why? It's bad enough that Johnny Knoxville is going to be at WrestleMania, even though I like Johnny Knoxville. But watch. He's going to face Sami Zayn at WrestleMania. And I heard he's getting an Intercontinental Championship shot. The Intercontinental Championship is possibly going to be on the line at WrestleMania. And watch. Calling it now. Johnny Knoxville is going to be winning the Intercontinental Championship at WrestleMania. Awful. Absolutely awful. If Johnny Knoxville wins the Intercontinental Championship at WrestleMania, the Intercontinental Championship will lose all of its prestige. It will make the Intercontinental title more irrelevant. Awful. Watch. It's going to happen at WrestleMania. Watch. So then we had Lita versus Becky Lynch. Raw Women's Championship. And this was a decent match. Lita, 46 years old, still can go. WWE Hall of Famer, legend. And we had Lita, she ended up coming out first. And then Becky Lynch then came out. So the winner of the match, of course, we'll get to face Bianca Belair at WrestleMania. Of course, we all knew who it was going to be. So the match ended up starting. Both Lita and Becky Lynch ended up locking up. Becky Lynch ended up going for Lita's arm. She ended up taking Lita down for the disarmer. But Lita ended up countering. Lita came back, delivered a shoulder to drop Becky Lynch. Lita showed no signs of ring rust here in this match. So Becky Lynch ended up rocking Lita in the mouth. She was talking some trash to Lita. Lita ended up ducking Becky Lynch. Becky Lynch ended up kicking Lita. Lita blocked the kick from Becky Lynch. She ended up sweeping her and nailed an arm drag. And she ended up slapping Becky. Lita blocked the right hand from Becky. She ended up fighting back, started loaded with some strikes on Becky. Lita delivered a hurricanrana to Becky. So Lita was going for the twist of fate. Becky ended up blocking that. Becky delivered some offense in the corner to Lita. Becky ended up using Lita's hair to whiplash her on the top rope. Becky came back in, started stomping away at Lita. And she ended up using the middle rope to choke Lita as the referee was warning her. Becky was talking some trash to the crowd as she started stomping away in the corner to Lita. Becky delivered a top rope leg drop to Lita. She ended up going for the cover. Lita kicked out at 2. Lita then ended up mounting Becky with some right hands. Lita ended up running into a back elbow in the corner to Becky Lynch. And then Becky ended up delivering a kick that put Lita down. Becky unloaded while Lita was on the apron. Becky Lynch delivered another second rope leg drop to the back of Lita's neck. So Becky went for the cover. Lita kicked out at 2. So Becky Lynch ended up connecting with a Beck Exploder suplex to Lita. She ended up nailing another Beck Exploder to Lita. And Lita blocked the third Beck Exploder, countered that with a DDT. And Lita was delivering some right hands to Becky. Becky ended up fighting back, and Lita started unloading with some strikes. Lita ducked a clothesline, nailed one of her own. Lita delivered a corner splash to Becky. Lita ended up kicking Becky away from the corner, ended up taking her down, in the corner. Lita flied from the second rope with a cross body to Becky. She ended up going for the cover. Becky ended up kicking out at 2. Lita then went for the twist of fate, and Becky ended up blocking it. Lita fired off the disarmer and rolled Becky up for a 2 count. So Becky ended up rolling Lita from behind, and she ended up using the top rope, and Lita ended up kicking Becky's hands off of the rope, and Lita pulled Becky into a sleeper. And at the end of the match, Becky Lynch ended up nailing the manhandle slam because Becky ended up missing the moonsault. Lita ended up missing the twist of fate. We had Lita end up climbing up to the top and deliver the moonsault, the Lita salt. And she went for the cover, and Becky ended up kicking out. So Becky nailed the manhandle slam to Lita. And there you go. Becky Lynch ended up winning the match, retaining the Raw Women's Championship. And post-match, Lita stood tall in the ring. And she was just celebrating with the fans. And that was that. But predictable. We all knew Becky Lynch was going to retain the title. And she's going to be facing Bianca Belair at WrestleMania. Raw Women's Championship is going to be on the line. That's going to be one of the main events for night one of WrestleMania. That's what I said earlier. That's how I would book the end of night one of WrestleMania. Overall, decent match. And then we had a video package on The Undertaker's WWE Hall of Fame induction. The Undertaker is going into the WWE Hall of Fame this year, and it's very well deserved, as it should be. The Undertaker is one of the greatest WWE superstars of all time. And to see him go in the Hall of Fame, it's going to be awesome. And I can't wait to see it. And who I think should induct Undertaker into the Hall of Fame? It should be Kane. I think Kane would be the perfect guy to induct The Undertaker into the Hall of Fame, which is probably going to happen. So it was an awesome video package showcasing highlights of Taker's career. And then we had the Viking Raiders versus the Usos. SmackDown Tag Team titles on the line. This was an absolute waste. This match ended in a no contest. The Viking Raiders came out, and the Usos ended up attacking them at the bottom of the ramp. Jimmy and Jay ended up being the Viking Raiders at ringside. The Usos ended up double teaming on Ivar, and they slammed him on top of Eric. So referees end up coming down to check on the Viking Raiders. The Usos end up backing away from the Viking Raiders. The Usos end up raising their fingers in the air, and that was that. Match went to no contest. So if I was the Viking Raiders and the Usos, I would be pissed here because they fly 18 hours from here in the U.S. to Saudi Arabia, only for them to get to Saudi Arabia and for WWE creators to say, oh yeah, we're not going to have the match. We're just going to have a beatdown between you guys. What a waste. I feel bad for the Viking Raiders and the Usos to travel 18 hours to Saudi Arabia and to tell them, oh yeah, the match is not going to happen. WWE creative will tell them, oh yeah, the match is not going to happen. We're just going to have a beatdown. So we're sorry we had to waste you guys to fly 18 hours down to Saudi Arabia just for a beatdown. So we're possibly going to be getting the match on SmackDown. Or we're going to have one-on-one matches. Or we're going to have Eric versus Jimmy, or Eric versus Jay, or Ivar versus Jimmy, Ivar versus Jay. Watch. We're going to have this match possibly on SmackDown, or they're going to drag it out to WrestleMania. We might get this match at WrestleMania. But what a waste of time. I'd be pissed if I was the Viking Raiders or the Usos. Just to fly out for 18 hours. Just for somebody in creative to tell you, oh yeah, we're not going to have the match. We're just going to do a beatdown. Main event. The men's Elimination Chamber match. WWE Championship on the line. Brock Lesnar versus Seth Rollins versus Austin Theory versus Riddle versus Styles versus Bobby Lashley, the WWE Champion. This was a enjoyable chamber match. This was better than the women's chamber. Far, far better than the women's chamber. So we had Bobby Lashley end up coming out, almighty Bobby Lashley. Son Styles end up coming out. Styles end up entering his pod. Out came Riddle next. Austin Theory then came out. He ended up stopping outside the chamber, took a selfie. Seth Rollins was then out. Seth Rollins was dancing his way down to the chamber. And then Brock Lesnar came out, got a big pop from the Saudi crowd in Jeddah. Lesnar started bouncing around on the stage. He ended up heading to the chamber. Lesnar ended up entering and laughed at Bobby Lashley in his pod. And Lesnar was intimidating the other participants. He then went into his own pod. So the match started off with Rollins and Austin Theory. Rollins ended up ducking Theory, and Theory delivered a headlock. Both Rollins and Theory ended up on the ropes. Rollins nailed a sling blade on Theory. Rollins started dancing around. Theory ended up attacking Rollins, hit a fallaway slam. Theory ended up delivering a back suplex to Rollins and a flying clothesline. Theory had some more offense on Rollins. He then delivered a fisherman suplex to Rollins. He ended up going for the cover. Rollins kicked out at 2. Rollins then came back up, delivered 2 big kicks to Theory. He ended up sending Theory out to the steel. Rollins ended up sending Theory into the chamber wall, started grinding Theory's face into the chains of the chamber. Rollins then ended up decking Theory, ended up going for the buckle bomb. And Rollins, when he delivered the buckle bomb to Theory, Rollins ended up putting Theory through Lashley's pod. So the glass shattered. Lashley ended up going down. And Lashley was dazed. So the next man to enter the match was Riddle. So Riddle delivered a overhead kick and some running forearms to Rollins. And then he hit an explosive suplex from the corner. Riddle delivered a running senton. And Riddle delivered a senton to Theory on the steel. And we saw Adam Pearce and officials. They were in the chamber. They were checking on Lashley, because Lashley went down hard as Rollins ended up delivering the buckle bomb to Theory through Lashley's pod. So Lashley hit one of the support beams in the pod. So Lashley at this point was taken out of the chamber. And Michael Cole on commentary ended up saying that he hopes to have an update on Bobby Lashley. So at this point, we're possibly going to be crowning a new WWE champion since Lashley was taken out. So Rollins delivered a splash to Riddle for a 2 count. And then the next entry into the chamber was AJ Styles. Styles ended up rushing in. He went to work on Rollins and Riddle. Styles delivered a close 2 count on Riddle. And he delivered a torture rack and a slam to Rollins. He ended up going for the cover, and Rollins ended up kicking out at 2. Styles ended up leaping out with a right hand to Theory on the steel. He ended up dropping Theory face first onto the platform, the steel platform. Riddle and Styles ended up going at it in the ring. So Styles delivered a dragon screw leg whip to put Riddle down. He was delivering some kicks to Riddle as he was focusing on his knee, on Riddle's knee. So Lesnar was looking on from his pod. He was smiling at Styles. And we had later on, Riddle ended up sending Rollins to the steel next to Styles. And Riddle ended up going for the draping DDT. And he hit it on Styles and Rollins, just like Randy Orton does, because Randy Orton always does the draping DDT, the double draping DDT. So Riddle then dropped to the mat just like Randy Orton, and the timer ended up going off. And Riddle ended up seeing that. So he was getting ready for Brock Lesnar. Although the next man in the chamber would have been Bobby Lashley. But of course, Lashley had to be taken out. So Lesnar was furious. And Lesnar kicked himself out of his pod. And as soon as Lesnar kicked himself out of his pod, he unloaded on everyone. So Lesnar immediately went for Rollins first. Lesnar delivered the F5 to Rollins. He went for the cover. Rollins was eliminated. So Michael Cole gave us an update on commentary on Bobby Lashley. Michael Cole ended up saying that Bobby Lashley was undergoing concussion protocol testing and will not be back in the match. So Brock Lesnar then leveled Riddle and ended up pinning him. Riddle was eliminated. Lesnar was stalking Styles and Austin Theory. And Lesnar delivered the F5 to Styles. And he went for the cover, and Styles was eliminated. So it was down to Brock Lesnar and Austin Theory. So Lesnar ended up kicking Styles out of the chamber. Theory ended up getting up. Brock Lesnar ended up looking at Theory and smiled. Theory ended up trying to escape. And Lesnar ended up making sure that the door was shut so Theory wouldn't get out of the chamber. Lesnar removed his gloves. He started stalking Austin Theory around the chamber. Theory was trying to keep distance between him and Lesnar. Lesnar started chasing Austin Theory. And Theory ended up going into a pod to escape. And Lesnar ended up kicking his way through the pod. He ended up dragging Austin Theory out and delivered a suplex, a big suplex to Theory on the steel, which was crazy. It was crazy to see Lesnar kick his way through the pod and then out of nowhere land a huge suplex to Theory on the steel. It was crazy. So Lesnar ended up grabbing Theory, ended up looking to put him away, and Theory ended up nailing a low blow to Lesnar. Theory ended up nailing the rolling dropkick to bring Lesnar to one knee. Theory then followed up with a DDT. He ended up going for the cover. Lesnar kicked out at 2. So Austin Theory here was pleading with Lesnar. So Theory ended up climbing up the chamber, and he escaped through the chains. Lesnar quickly climbed up the chains and trapped Theory. Lesnar ended up bringing Theory back to the top of one of the pods, and he ended up smashing Theory's face into the plexiglass at the top of the chamber. Theory ended up collapsing at Lesnar's feet on top of the pod. So Lesnar then scooped Theory on top of the pod, holding him on his shoulders. Lesnar ended up launching Theory off of the pod to the steel down below with a F5. So he dumped Theory to the steel, and the fans popped at that. That was crazy, seeing Lesnar F5 Theory from the top of the pod, and Theory ended up landing down on the steel. So Lesnar climbed back down, and he covered Theory in the middle of the ring. And there you go. Brock Lesnar wins the match and is once again the WWE Champion. Post-match, Lesnar ended up standing tall, and he ended up mocking Theory with the selfie. So Michael Cole on commentary confirmed that it will be champion versus champion at WrestleMania, where Roman Reigns will face Brock Lesnar. So it's not title versus title. It's champion versus champion. So Lesnar then ended up raising the title, and Lesnar ended up posing with fans at ringside, and that was how Elimination Chamber went off the air. Overall, this men's Elimination Chamber for the WWE Championship, it was an enjoyable chamber match. It was a good chamber match. It was much better than the women's chamber. But I gotta say, where is this leading to? Bobby Lashley was taken out of the chamber, You already know that Lashley's going to get a championship match against Brock Lesnar. That's going to happen possibly at night 1 of WrestleMania. So you could do a night 1 at WrestleMania. Bobby Lashley versus Brock Lesnar for the WWE Championship. Whoever wins that match, which obviously is going to be predictable, Brock Lesnar is going to defeat Bobby Lashley at night 1 of WrestleMania. So Lesnar could go on to the next night at night 2 of WrestleMania and face Roman Reigns, which of course is going to be predictable because Roman is going to be winning the WWE Championship. So he's going to be holding the Universal Championship and the WWE Championship. So it's going to be predictable. But if you think about it, WWE said, oh, there's going to be another surprise for WrestleMania. I think with this whole thing with Lesnar and Roman, at the end of that match where Roman wins the WWE Championship and he's double champion, he's Universal Champion and WWE Champion, which I hope they're going to unify the titles there. So what makes that predictable is you could tell that they're going to have The Rock come out at the end of night 2 at WrestleMania, and he's going to get face to face with Roman Reigns, and that's going to set off next year's WrestleMania main event at SoFi Stadium in Los Angeles. You can already tell that that's what's going to happen. The Rock's going to be there, Dwayne Johnson. He's going to have a stare down with Roman, and that sets off your main event match for WrestleMania next year in Los Angeles. And WWE, they're playing hot potato. They played hot potato with the WWE Championship. First it went from Brock Lesnar, and then it went to Bobby Lashley, where Bobby Lashley ended up winning at the Royal Rumble, only for Lashley to drop it back to Brock Lesnar at Elimination Chamber today, and only for Brock Lesnar to drop it to Roman at WrestleMania. So they're making the WWE Championship irrelevant, as it seems, with them playing hot potato with the title. So after Lesnar is done, there's going to be nobody else. Lesnar's going to go away, and what is Reigns going to do? Reigns is going to go to Monday Night Raw, and he's going to wrestle the guys, or he's going to stay on SmackDown and wrestle over there. We need to have answers. What is Reigns going to do when he's both the WWE and Universal Champion? Hopefully WWE unifies the titles at WrestleMania. And, I know they're possibly going to not end the brand split, which they should do. We should end the brand split. We don't need 2 rosters, in my opinion. I think they should just end the brand split, which I know WWE, they're possibly not going to do. So, we need answers. What's Reigns going to do after WrestleMania when he's the double champion? I don't know. We'll have to wait and see what WWE does. But that's how I see what's going to go down. Bobby Lashley's going to get his championship match at WrestleMania at night 1. So it's going to be Bobby Lashley versus Brock Lesnar. Predictable. Brock Lesnar's going to win. Brock Lesnar's going to go the next night at WrestleMania and face Roman Reigns. And Brock Lesnar's going to drop the title to Roman. And so Roman's going to be a double champion. He's going to be Universal Champion and WWE Champion. So that's how it's going to be. That's how it's going to play out. But anyways, that's it for my review of Elimination Chamber. Thank you all for watching. Hope you all enjoyed this review. Definitely give the video a thumbs up, comment, subscribe. And until next video, I'll see you all later.